Today I'm going to demonstrate how to mix color and a little bit about color bridging. So before we start, I wanted to show you again, this is how we laid out our primary palette. We've got red, we've got yellow. This is the cadmium red light. Y'all have naphthol red medium or cadmium red light, yellow medium, and then at the top we have the cool colors. We've got ultramarine blue. Now again, we could add white, we could add black up here, and we'd have warm, cool. You could use any type of palette. This works up pretty nice for a setup. I've got my palette knife. I've got a piece of paper to do the exercises with, and I've got my cup of water over here, a rag to wipe off with, and my brush to do the actual painting exercise. So what we want to do is we want to set up a little bit of a challenge for you all, a little bit of an exercise, and that is to mix the secondaries first and to see what we can do with color bridging with those. So first I'm going to mix in orange, and when I do this, remember I showed you I have this little hash mark, this little line on my palette knife to give me a little bit of consistency. So for instance, if I'm going to mix orange, I wouldn't just take 50% red, 50% yellow. That's going to just stay too much towards red. Even though we're doing a mid-mixture, it's going to visually be a mid-mixture instead of like equal parts red and yellow. So what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to take 2 parts yellow. And what's nice about a palette is like this is we can put the colors in the same kind of range, so we keep warms down here, cools up here. So I'm going to take 2 parts yellow. You can see I'm being somewhat consistent about the increments that I use, which is helpful because then you can start to kind of remember these ratios, and you can be like, oh, that's right, orange, 2 parts yellow, 1 part white or red. And then when you get more complex, you can start to remember what you did to get to those color combinations. So here's 1 part red with the 2 parts yellow. And then I'm going to take my palette knife and I'm kind of like redistribute this and also kind of like squash it down like so. It's going to mix better. I remember I told you that these are flexible. They're flexible so that you can do this sort of thing, and you can see when it squeezes out, you can see some parts that aren't quite mixed. And that helps to mix it a little bit quicker and easier. So here we have our orange. We're going to lay this out in a circle. And I'm going to try to keep this all in one spot for the sake of clarity, also for space. I'll put it all right there. I'm going to wipe this off, get ready to mix my next color. So this orange, I want you, the challenge is to lay this out similar to a color wheel. So we're going to have red at the top. I'm going to mix this orange right here. So I'm going to lay it out kind of in the circular part right over here. So there's our nice orange. I'm going to wash out my brush, switch colors. It's really good to do this sort of exercise so you start to see what your colors can do, the limitations of them, and how you can get them to go in the direction that you would like for your paintings. This is going to be really helpful for your abstract study because you're going to have to be very specific with the colors. Next, I'm going to mix green. I'm going to mix this green right here. So on this, I'm going to take about 3 parts yellow, and I'm going to put it up here on my cool section. So 3 parts yellow. And it's good to get all of the paint off so you don't corrupt your paint. And I'm going to take 1 part blue. I'm going to mix this up to get my green, and you can squash it. Now, if you felt like this wasn't the accurate green that you were shooting for, then add a little bit more yellow or whatever you need to get it towards the correct color. So I'm going to put this, consolidate it in one little section. Clean off my palette knife, and I'm going to lay this green out. So you see our orange here. I'm going to put my green down here. So take a little bit of this, and boom, there we have our green. Next, wash out my brush. I'm going to mix this violet. Now this violet color might be a little lackluster depending on what colors you have, but this is, again, this is where we can see the limitation of our colors. I'm going to do about 50-50 in this case. I'm going to put it up here. And I'm going to do 50% red, 50% blue. Depending on what red you have, this could look more or less like a purple. It's difficult to get a really good purple without it kind of going brown here. But this is the limitation of the red that we have. But that's okay, because you can also use Naphthol Red Medium, which is going to be really nice for a violet. And Quinacridone Magenta, if we add a little bit of yellow to it, we'll make a really nice red, and then we can intermix that with the blue. Clean off my palette knife. Take this deeper, darker violet here, and I'm going to put it up here to match this. So we've got the red, we've got the green, and we're going to put the violet over there. That looks pretty nice. Next, what I want to do is I want to put out the primaries on here, and we're going to do the next step of this, which will be to intermix these colors to get some guesses as what will happen. I'm going to take some red. What will happen when we go into a particular direction with our colors and pre-guessing where they will go before we actually mix them. So I'm going to put red up here. I'm going to take my blue, I'm going to put it down here. Now this next part I'm going to do with just my brush just to speed things up, but you could slowly do this. We're going to make sort of a continuum, which looks pretty cool here. So we've got our red, our violet in between the red and the blue. We've got our blue, and then we still need to put our yellow down here. I'll clean up my brush. Basically at this point what we have is our primaries, and here we have our secondaries. But what I want to do, and I'm going to do this with my brush just to show you, to speed things up. I'm going to show you, here's taking a little bit of red, put it right here. Here's taking a little bit of the orange and mixing them together, and then I can put them here for a continuum. Wash on my brush. I'm going to take my orange, I'm going to mix it with a little bit of this yellow here, put that here. Needs a little more yellow. And I'm going to paint it right here in between there. Next what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my yellow and my green, do the same thing. Take a little bit of the yellow, take a little bit of the green, a little more yellow. And then boom, we have that yellowish green. Do the same thing with the blue and the green. Blue, green, boom. So that's the secondary color, greenish blue. Do the same thing with violet. So here it is with red and purple, which would go there. And here it is blue and violet. Boom for this. The next thing, this is where we get into color bridging. This is pretty cool. What happens when I take colors that are directly opposite? So, and I want to do it the secondaries. So my secondaries, remember, are here, here, and here. So I want to do this. I'm going to take my green and mix it with my red. And I'm going to see what happens when I do that. So I'm going to take a little bit of this green, put a little bit of water in it to to extend it a little bit further. I'm going to paint it here. I'm going to do the same thing, take a little bit of water, do this with my red as well. Boom, like so. Now I'm going to take both of those kind of watery mixtures right here, and I'm going to try to do like an even mixture, about 50-50, and paint it in the middle, like so. Now I'm going to do the same thing with my orange, which is directly opposite my blue, here and here. So I'm going to take this orange, put a little water in it, paint it here, take my blue, put a little water in it, put it right there like so. And then what happens when we mix those two colors? Take a little bit of water, a little bit of blue, a little bit of orange, and boom, do like this. And look, it's a similar color. We call these chromatic grays, which is pretty interesting because it's a gray, but it has color in it, so it's not a monochromatic gray. I'm gonna do the same thing now with yellow and violet. Get a little bit of water, drop it in the yellow. So here, I did that fairly cleanly too. You can see where it looks yellow. It hasn't mixed with my other colors. It doesn't look green or anything. Do the same thing with the violet that I've mixed up. Boom, right here. Now I'm going to take those two colors and I'm going to mix them together, taking a little bit of my yellow, taking a little bit of my violet, mixing those two together. And look at this, boom, chromatic gray. Pretty interesting, pretty good, right? And you could have a spectrum now mixing between any one of those colors here, like these are our secondaries here. Here's our primaries, but we could also do it with our intermediates, like our bluish violet, our reddish violet, our yellowish orange, our reddish orange, yellow green, bluish green, same idea. So this is a little bit about color bridging. But one other thing that I want you to think about in terms of color bridging is like if you have this color right here, but you want to get to a completely different color, say this kind of brownish color, how do we get there? What do we need to do to get to this kind of brownish color? And this is where we get this concept of color bridging. That is the transition from this color to this. So, for instance, I'm going to take my palette knife here and I'm going to say, what if I took, you know, this much red and I take just a touch of blue, and I'm going to take just a touch of yellow. Where does that put us? Let's actually add a little bit more. Let's see how close this gets to that color that I need. I'm going to paint this. Next to here, you can see if I think about this as a spectrum, it's still closer to this than it is to that. So what do I need to get to there? So I'm going to try to add a little bit more blue to this to get to there. And actually what I'm going to do is, because I know it's going to take green to get to it, I'm going to take a little bit of yellow, a little bit of blue, mix those together first to get me a greenish color. Like so. It's fun mixing color. I love it. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And then I'm going to take that red and intermix it. So I've sort of gone backwards a step. In other words, I had my first attempt at that color, which is right here, and now this is my second attempt at this color. And I'm going to paint it next to there and see where it hits in the continuum. Boom, it's right there. It's getting closer, but it's still not good enough. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take, instead of mixing, so that was my first attempt, this is my second attempt. Instead of making a third attempt, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my green that I already mixed here, and I'm gonna add it to this color here, but separately. Over here, I'm just gonna use my paintbrush to do this. And my guess is this is gonna get me closer to that color. And I'm gonna put it right here next to that. Look at how close that is, right? That's pretty good. This is called color bridging. What does it take to get from color number 1 to get to color number 2? This is color bridging. And you can see there's a continuity here. But also when we do this, when we're starting to make our primary and secondary color wheel, we can start to see, like, when we intermix colors directly opposite each other, this really interesting thing happens here with our chromatic grays. I think it's really helpful if you start to think about figuring out what your colors do. Take some yellow in a clean book. This is good. I just have paper, but in a clean page in your sketchbook, you can do the same kind of thing. Like, what happens when I mix a little bit of yellow with a little bit of blue? Thinking about this, what does this color look like? You know, and then what if I add more yellow to that? And then paint beside that. You can start to see what your colors can do. Like, what if I add more yellow to that? And then paint it beside that. Boom. What if I take that color and I add even more yellow to it? Like so. You can see my brush is somewhat corrupt, but here we see what I can do with the colors. And this is a nice little practice. This is a nice little fun exercise to do in your sketchbook. The more you do things like this, the more you're going to come to understand color and see what your particular colors that you have, what they can do. You can even make notations in here, which is really helpful, and you can refer back to this, doing sort of like a color chart. You can say that this was 3 parts blue, 1 part yellow, 2 blue, 2 yellow, 3 yellow, 1 blue. And then you can refer back to this. This isn't wasted time and it isn't wasted paint because you can always refer back to what you did here. You can use this as a helpful chart, a reference to go back to again and again in your sketchbook. A lot of painters will do this. So these are ideas about color bridging, color mixing. I just wanted to kind of lay this out, help you along a little bit. It's the idea is set off on the right foot, do it the right way. It's sort of like a practice. It takes discipline to do this as opposed to just like making a mess of your palette and just saying, I'll get there eventually and throwing, like, you know, putting more and more paint on it. That doesn't solve it. It takes discipline. It takes a little bit of just fine tuning it and you'll get there much quicker. So signing off. Peace out.